Hi there. Today we read chapter 12 of Enid Blyton's The Land of Far Beyond. In the last chapter, the group of 7 lost another. The 10 that started have dwindled to 6. All that's left is 1 grown-up and 5 children. So now what? But before we continue, if you have not watched the previous chapters, please do so before continuing. Welcome to my space of make-believe. With just words we shall weave, places and people, adventures surreal. I am Tell a Story. This is an invitation to come with me. Chapter 12. The House of Peace. Content and his wife Gladness. 3 glorious days. The travellers set out once more and meet talkative and gossip, boastful and brag, the house of nonsense. When the little company of 6 reached the soldiers, they were faced with drawn swords, but the faces of the men were friendly. "Are you friends of our master, Sir Content?" asked the captain. "We want to visit him and his house of peace," said Mr. Scornful. "We are not enemies." "Give me your word that you will not disturb the quiet of the house of peace," said the captain. "It is the duty of us soldiers of goodwill to guard our master's house from all that might disturb it. That is why we fight people like strife, quarrelsome, envy, jealousy, and malice. We are always on the lookout for them, but peaceful folk may pass." "We are peaceable folk," said Mr. Scornful. "We are on our way to the land of far beyond. We have not had very good fortune so far, and would dearly like a rest in the house of peace." "Pass, friends," said the captain, and he dropped his sword, so that the point touched the ground. The other soldiers stood back, and a pathway was made for the 6 travellers to walk through. Gallant and Daring were waiting for them. "What a mercy we weren't afraid, and walked boldly up to speak to the men," cried Gallant. "It's no good being afraid of anything, however frightening it looks. Fortune favours the bold." "Well, I think you were very brave," said Peter. "How far is it to the house of peace, Gallant?" "Through this gate, and over this meadow, and then across the little stone bridge to the house," said Daring, linking his arm in his brother's and in Peter's too. "Come along." The 8 of them set out together. They went through the white gate and over a meadow studded with thousands of bright flowers. In the distance a stream gurgled, and beyond it rose a pleasant house with cream-washed walls, thatched roof, and leaded windows. "Doesn't it look restful?" said Anna, whose feet felt sore and tired. "There are some cows," said Lily. "We may have milk to drink. Look at those doves." And he pointed to where a flock of white birds circled in the air around their tall dove cote. Beside a pond, set in a quiet courtyard, 6 white pigeons strutted, their reflections shining perfectly in the water, on the top of which lay the waxen flowers of water lilies. "Oh, this is heavenly," said Patience, stopping at the little stone bridge across the stream to feast her eyes on the quiet house and garden. "If only we could stay here for a day or 2. I feel as if my burden might become lighter." When they got to the house, a tall, quiet-faced man with deep brown eyes and a smiling mouth came out to meet them. Behind him was his wife Gladness, a sweet-faced woman with a lilting musical voice and eyes that shone like stars. "Welcome to you all," said Content. His wife kissed the 5 children and exclaimed at their torn and dirty clothes. "Poor lambs, you must stay here in our house for a while and let me wash your clothes for you. How tired you all look, except Gallant and Daring. I don't suppose they ever get tired." Everyone went into the house. It was cool and quiet. The sun shone in at the windows and lay in pools on the floor, and flowers were everywhere in tall vases and shallow bowls. It was a most beautiful house. Upstairs were cool bedrooms with soft-colored curtains and inviting beds. Here again there were flowers, and the children loved the pictures on the walls and the soft carpets on the floors. "What a rest it will be for us to stay here," said Peter. "I feel dirty and tired. I would like a good bath, but I don't see how I can have it with this burden on my back." However, in some deft way of her own, Gladness managed to give all the tired children a warm bath, and to dress them in simple tunics, whilst she had their dirty clothes washed and mended. She brushed their tangled hair and gave them a meal of creamy milk, new brown bread, homemade jam, golden butter, and fresh fruit. Even Mr. Scornful did not turn up his nose at the simple fare, and ate as much as the others. Gallant and Daring spent one night at the House of Peace, and then went on their way, singing in their musical voices. The company was sorry to see them go, for they had hoped to have them as companions. "Oh, they won't wait for anyone," said Sir Content. "They must always be up and doing. Now, you must stay for 3 days, and then you will be rested. There are many difficulties and dangers on the way to the City of Happiness, and you must be strong enough to meet them." So for 3 glorious days, the children and Mr. Scornful stayed with Content and Gladness in the House of Peace. It was a wonderful holiday. It was lovely to wake up with the sound of doves cooing outside, and to look out of the window and to see the fat cows grazing peacefully in the meadows. "I shall never want to live in a town again," said Anna. "There is always noise and dirt and discontent there. Here, in this peaceful countryside, there is beauty and quiet and gladness." "Ah, you will find discontent and wickedness even in the countryside," said Sir Content, who was beside her. "It is ourselves who can keep the peace or spoil it. What is the use of having beauty and peace around us if we have none in our own hearts? It is possible to live anywhere and have peace and happiness." Everyone was sad when the time came to go. Gladness dressed them in their own clothes again, cleaned and mended. She slipped them cleverly over their burdens, and sighed as she felt how big the loads were. "Poor children! You will be glad to get rid of these terrible burdens. They haven't felt so heavy on our shoulders whilst we have been in the House of Peace," said Anna. "No burdens feel so heavy here," said Gladness as she kissed the children goodbye. "Now, go on your way and keep to the right path. Come and see us again if ever you want a holiday. Content and I can always be found in our House of Peace." They all felt sad to leave the restful house, with its cooing doves, quiet pond, and pleasant garden. They set off down a little green path that led back very quickly to the way they had to follow. Soon they were on the narrow path again, and trudged along with their heavy burdens. There were but 6 of them now, and Mr. Scornful was the only grown-up. "I hope no more of us get left behind," said Peter. "We seem such a small company now. We must stick together." "I didn't think I'd be left to look after a pack of children," said Mr. Scornful. "You'd better all do as you're told, or I'll not walk with you." Mr. Scornful was feeling the weight of his burden again. He had not noticed it so much whilst he had been in the House of Peace, but now it weighed very heavy indeed, and he felt bored and bad-tempered. The children fell behind. They did not want to walk with him if he felt like that. They talked quietly among themselves. Mr. Scornful felt more and more bored with his own company, so when he saw a man and a woman in the distance, he hurried to catch them up and bade them good day very politely. "My name is Scornful," he told them. "I am on the way to the City of Happiness. Who are you, and where do you travel to?" "My name is Talkative, and this is my wife Gossip," said the man, taking off his hat politely. "We are meeting 2 friends of ours in a little while, Boastful and Brag. Do walk with us, for you must be bored to travel only with children." Mr. Scornful was delighted to have company. The man was a wonderful talker, and the woman had all kinds of interesting news to tell him. She had often been to stay in the City of Turmoil, and she knew a great many of Mr. Scornful's friends there. "Yes, I knew Mr. Success," she said, "and Mrs. Climb High was quite a friend of mine, but after I found out that she didn't pay her bills, I wasn't friends with her any more." "Oh? Didn't she pay her bills?" asked Mrs. Scornful, quite interested. Well, to think of that. And she always boasted of her wealth, too. Did you know Miss Snob? "Oh, yes," said Gossip. "She always looked down her nose at anyone who hadn't a cousin or somebody with a title. And how tired I used to get of hearing her say she had danced with the prince. If she knew how people laughed at her." Mr. Scornful had always thought Miss Snob a wonderful person. Now he felt quite pleased to meet somebody who pulled her to pieces. He went on talking eagerly to Gossip and Talkative, thoroughly enjoying himself. Soon the 3 of them caught up with 2 men, who were introduced as Boastful and Brag. The 5 walked on amiably together. and the children behind heard the sound of their voices as they walked along together. "Yes," they heard Boastful say, "yes, I once had a house with 100 bedrooms, and I kept 200 servants. There was always a horse for every guest to ride, and a servant for every guest too. You should see the clothes we wore," went on Bragg, who was as good as his brother at telling marvelous stories. "I had a cloak lined with pure gold." "Wasn't it heavy?" asked Mr. Scornful in amazement. "Very," said Bragg. "I had to get 4 servants to hold it up for me when I walked. We always had gold plates and dishes on our dinner table too. What a pity you can't come and stay a while with us, so that we might show you all our possessions." Mr. Scornful did not want to be outdone in this talk of grand things. He too had been wealthy, and so he began to talk loudly of his 20 gardeners, his beautiful black horse, and his magnificent dinner table, which would seat 200 people. But the others did not want to hear, and they interrupted him continually, so that he became cross. Meanwhile, the children were calling out behind him, which made him crosser still. "Are you nursemaids to these brats?" asked Bragg with a grin. "They are nothing to do with me," answered Mr. Scornful angrily. "We all started out in a company together, and one by one the other grown-ups fell out, until only I and the 5 children were left. Let them shout, let them call." The children were most distressed. Mr. Scornful had been so busy talking and boasting and listening to the others that he had not noticed the path he was taking. Now all of them had left the narrow path and were traveling in the wrong direction. The children had noticed it very soon and were shouting to Mr. Scornful to stop and turn back. "Mr. Scornful! Mr. Scornful! We are on the wrong path! Please stop and turn back! Mr. Scornful!" "I'll turn back and whip you all!" cried Mr. Scornful in a rage. "Be quiet! I don't want to listen to you!" The children stopped and wondered what to do. Did Mr. Scornful know they had left the path? Were his new friends showing him a short cut? What was happening? In the end, Peter ran after him and caught hold of his arm. "Mr. Scornful, please listen. We are on the wrong path." Mr. Scornful heard then what Peter said. He stopped and looked around. He could not see the right path anywhere. "How tiresome!" he said. "I was so interested in listening and talking, yes, and in boasting too, that I didn't notice where I was going. Hey, Bragg, we've come the wrong way. Do you know the right way back to the path?" "We're not keeping to that path," said Bragg with a grin. "We can't be bothered to for long. We're going on home. We live just here. Look, there's our house. Come along in and have something to eat." "Well, I suppose we may as well," said Mr. Scornful, and the 5 children went with him to Bragg's house. It was a very noisy house, full of people who all talked at the top of their voices. They were all dressed grandly, but the children with their sharp eyes noticed rags peeping from under many a grand frock. The cuffs of some of the men's shirts were frayed too, and their shoes were cracked. "They're not so grand as they make themselves out to be," whispered Anna to Peter. "And aren't these sandwiches horrible? The bread is as stale as can be." Mr. Scornful soon got tired of all the noise. He got up to go. Gossip and Talkative got up too. They had come in with the others. "I'm sorry you're leaving my house of nonsense so soon," said Bragg politely, as he and Boastful said goodbye. "We always think it is such an entertaining place. Plenty of people like to come here." "Thank you, but we must go on," said Mr. Scornful, feeling suddenly tired of all the silly talk he had heard. "Goodbye." "Our house is just down the way," said Gossip, taking Scornful's arm. "Just come in and have a sit down there. We can give you better sandwiches than you will ever get at that tiresome Bragg's." "Dear me, I thought you were such good friends of Boastful and Bragg," said Mr. Scornful in surprise. "Now you talk against them." "Come along," said Talkative. "We'll set you on the right way to the path after you have visited our cottage." The end of chapter 12. No, don't go with them. Stop, and go back to the narrow path. I have a strange feeling they are going to. Well, we'll find out in the next chapter. Hey, if you would like to read this book instead, you can search it up online as it is in the public domain. Otherwise, please join me in the next chapter. I would love to have you for company. Till the next time, go grab yourself a book, read, and let your imagination take you anywhere. Be anyone and do anything. And do share your reads in the comments. Would love to know. Thank you for watching. Goodbye.